Hello, my name is Carol Elliott. I am from New Zealand, born and bred first generation Kiwi. My parents are from Northern Ireland. Dad was from Ballinamallard, County Fermanagh, and Mum from Cavanagh, County Tyrone. They emigrated to New Zealand in 1955. My one and only visit, so far anyway, to Northern Ireland was in 1997. I would like to tell you a little bit about Trasna Island in Loch Earn and one of my great ancestors who lived there. My great-great-great-grandmother was Margaret Elliott, also known as Orange Peggy, Queen of Trasna. She lived to be 108 and lived on Trasna Island for at least 58 years of her life. Peggy was married to William Elliott and they had 9 sons, but not all the sons were born or lived on Trasna. Trasna is a small island of around 12 acres, and it was owned by Edward Archdale, who leased out the land and buildings. The valuation of tenements records in 1862 show an entry for Margaret Elliott as immediate lessor, with an annual lease of £9.10 for land and buildings. The island has been sold a few times, in 1907 and 1946, when it was owned by Mr. Edward de Kerr of Enniskillen, and he sold it to Captain Frank Cordner of British Columbia, Canada. The RSPB purchased Trasna in 2017 and have undertaken much restoration to bring it back to how it may have been in Peggy's time, and to preserve and manage its natural and cultural heritage for future generations. Trasna sits near Devonish Island, and in the past was a good spot to rest and a great vantage point for boat watching, like the passing of the Earn steamer. In fact, it was reported in the Fermanagh Mail and Enniskillen Chronicle in 1865 that the Loch Earn Regatta resumed after many years of absence. Trasna Island hosted the stewards of the races, and a large marquee for refreshments and the band was placed on the green. Here the rank, fashion and beauty stationed themselves for the best spot for seeing the races. However, the centre of attraction was the famed Orange Peggy, Queen of Trasna. No Elliots are recorded as living on Trasna in the tithes for 1825. The earliest record I can find of residence on Trasna Island is in the Trory Church birth records and the families of Liddy in 1807 and Edwards in 1816. We are not absolutely sure when Peggy and William married or Peggy's maiden name, but there is a record of a marriage at Mahagra Cross Parish Church on the 29th of July, 1804. Of William Elliott to Margaret Robinson, but it cannot be verified if this is our Peggy and William. It is also unknown where Peggy and William lived before Trasna, and no verified records of their first 5 sons can be found. Although a child named Robert was born to a William and Margaret Elliott at Mahagra Cross in 1807. The family appears in the Trory Church parish records in 1834 with the births of Andrew, Thomas and John on Trasna Island. Son William, my great-great-grandfather, was born around 1833, but there is no birth record from Trory Church. We know for sure there was an older son, John, who drowned at the age of about 18 years old with his father in 1838 or 39. Son Thomas drowned in the lake in 1863, aged 25. Son William emigrated to Lancashire with his family in the mid to late 1860s, although his eldest son, aged around 11 years old, remained behind with his grandmother, likely to help her on the farm. And this is my great-grandfather, William. Youngest son John emigrated with his family to Australia in 1867, and son Andrew remained in the district with his family. Andrew lived and farmed on Trasna Island after Peggy died until his death on the 30th of October 1921 at the age of 94. In the 1911 census for Andrew Elliott, the house and building return show at least 7 buildings on the island. 1 residence, 1 stable, 1 cow house, 1 calf house, 1 dairy, 1 fowl house, and 1 turf house. And likely these were also standing in Peggy's time. From all accounts, Peggy was a fine character, a hard-working mother, grandmother, and farmer of award-winning cattle, staunch and independent, friendly, playful, and welcoming of all. Many stories have Peggy dressed from head to toe in orange, adorned with ribbons, banging on her Lamberg drum, flying flags, and feeding the many who arrived at her door. When she was interviewed by Seton Milligan at the age of 107, she had no teeth, was hard of hearing, her eyesight was poor, but she was still hale and hearty. Peggy was described as a large-boned, strongly built woman, about 5'4" and very deeply furrowed, temperate in her habits, lived as she always had on simple foods, and did not smoke. She was very welcoming along with the other occupant of the house at the time, her granddaughter of about 25 years old. Her cottage, being the only habitation on the island in 1890, was surrounded by a shelter belt of trees. It had a thatched roof, 1 room, and no ceiling or chimney flue. The smoke from the fire escaped through a hole in the roof. There was a jamb sheltering the hearth from the door, with her favourite place to sit, in the corner by the fire. Peggy was asked how she calculated her age, and she said, "I distinctly remember the time of the uniting in 98 and seeing the army marching at Enniskillen and hearing the talk of the people, as nothing else was spoken of. I was then a girl of 14 years of age. As to the day on which I was born, my mother told me it was the 11th of June. Peggy spent more than half her life on Trasna Island without her husband. She would have been in her mid-50s when her husband William drowned. The fatherless family would have endured 2 famines, the Great Famine of 1845 to 1849 and the Irish Famine of 1879. It has been said that Peggy and her family on Little Trasna Island could be seen as a perfect symbol of their own situation, not only in tenacity and defiance, but cheerfulness and hospitality, surrounded but not overwhelmed. There are many stories about Peggy which I do not have time for today, but here are some small anecdotes and some newspaper reports which I hope you find interesting. It is said that on her baptism day, the 12th of July, her father and other Orangemen took her out to the shadow of the plantain, rolled her in an orange flag, gave her 3 wines in the breeze, and gave 3 cheers, and ever since she got nothing but Orange Peggy. Many accounts refer to Peggy as being a great oarswoman, rowing across to Trory or making the long journey to Enniskillen with fresh produce and bringing back stores for herself and guests. It is also said she could row a boat better than any man, and her life-saving prowess was well known, saving 30 to 40 people from drowning in the loch. She could play the pigeon gate, the geese in the bog, and many other tune on her Lamberg drum, and liked nothing better than thumping the goat skin on the shore. Around her island home was said to be a rich profusion of orange lilies. She was a good neighbour and kindly friend, steeped in the law of her district and county. She was something of a raconteur, storyteller, and her home became a meeting place in the district for all creeds. They flocked to her with their troubles and their problems, and she was generous with her advice and help, rich in her entertainment. Her visits to Enniskillen apparently caused a stir. My great-aunt Lena, Peggy's great-granddaughter, was reported to have said, "I don't think it's true, as the guidebook says, that every stitch of clothing she wore in her life was orange." But she never visited Enniskillen without wearing 2 great crossed orange sashes. She caused such a commotion whenever she walked through the town that my mother, as a young woman, hated walking with her. A warm welcome awaited visitors, irrespective of the foot they dug with. There was a peat fire in the hearth, a kitchen whitewashed like an eggshell, a large metal kettle of strong tea, and a big basket of bannocks laid up on the strong scrubbed table, more than enough for all comers. If you had been at an orange demonstration in Enniskillen in the early days of the Orange Institution, you could hardly have missed seeing Margaret Elliott. She would have been noticeable by reason of the fact that she wore orange emblems and had orange streamers adorning her hat, all symbolic of her deep attachment to the Protestant and Orange cause. She was famous for rearing fine black cattle, and there was never any haggling about price when buying from Peggy Elliott. The controversial life of Orange Peggy was ignored in a bicentennial history of Trory Parish, written by Canon John McNutt. "A good legend, but dubious history," he said. "Much of what is told about her today is legendary, with little documentation to establish it as fact. That she lived and died on the island of Trasna is fact." He goes on to say he admits that Orange Peggy must have been a colourful personality, a Deborah of a woman, a Mrs. Battle, a soldier of her sex. A call went out at the time to find said facts. A year later, in 1980, a well-documented fact was found with an entry in Volume 10 of Memorials of the Dead, 1918. Page 201, listing Orange Peggy's tombstone and her epitaph in Mahagra Cross Old Graveyard. Reported in the Fermanagh Mail Enniskillen Chronicle on 2 occasions, in 1877 and 1885, Peggy's little cottage was ransacked, items stolen, and farm animals killed or mutilated while she was away from the island. On one of these occasions, one of her sons saw what was happening from the northern bank and crossed over to the island, smashed holes in the intruder's boat, and then returned to notify the local police. Reported in the same newspaper, Thursday, July the 5th, 1877, that Peggy was summoned for having a dog in her possession without a licence. In reply to the bench, she said she did not know anything about paying for a dog. She was fined 1 shilling and 1 shilling costs and ordered to take out a licence or drown the dog. She said she would not drown it. She had never drowned anything in her life. She had had too many belonging to her drowned, and it was a shame to treat an old widow woman in such a manner. The fine was paid. This is one of my most favourite anecdotes, kindly given by Henry Robinson of the Ballinamallet Historical Society. The minister called to see Peggy, and when he was there, she remembered about her sick cow, so she asked the minister to pray for the animal. The minister wasn't too happy about taking on this task, but didn't like to offend, so he prayed in any case and concluded with the words, "If she lives, she lives. If she dies, she dies." Some time later, the minister was laid up with a bad throat infection like Quincy, so Peggy went to visit him. Before leaving, she offered to give him a prayer for healing, and in concluding, she qualified it with, "If you live, you live. If you die, you die." At this, the minister could not resist bursting into laughter, which caused the abscess to burst and the infection cleared. Peggy died on the 10th of August 1891 and was buried on the 12th of August at the Mahagra Cross churchyard. The weather was very stormy on the day of her funeral, and the men tasked with transporting her body from Trasna Island had a great deal of trouble in getting the coffin across in a cot to Ballycassidy, where it was met by the Orange men of the surrounding district. A procession was formed, headed by the Trory band, with drums and draped colours. The lodges and regalia formed in behind the coffin, which was covered with orange lilies and blue rockets. The funeral procession passed on its way through Ballinamallard to Mahagra Cross churchyard. It was joined by large numbers, anxious to honour the remains of Orange Peggy. Her headstone was erected after the efforts of many to raise the funds, spurred on after a letter to the editor appeared in the Impartial Reporter, September 1891. A marble headstone marks Peggy's grave with the inscription, "Erected to the memory of Margaret Elliott, popularly known as Orange Peggy, Queen of Trasna, who died 10th of August 1891. Regretted not only by the Protestants of Fermanagh, but by all classes who, for generations, had learned to respect her, aged 108 years. I would like to leave you with a wonderful poem written about Peggy a very long time ago, found in an attic in Ballinamallard. Author and date is unknown. And it is this poem my father gave me more than 40 years ago after one of his visits back home, and it has always been one of my personal treasures. Tribute to Trasna's Queen. Farewell to Peggy Elliott, my first love and the last. She lived on Trasna Island, well sheltered from the blast. She was the Queen of Trasna, defender of the faith, a true blue Ulster lady, unfed to meet her death. She lived to be 100, and then for 8 years more, and many were the pilgrims who landed on her shore. She entertained them royally with tea and fresh made scones, while stories she would tell them of Rantowers and of Bournes. She loved her lonely island, and she kept a lambic drum to batter out a welcome to all who chose to come. She roved to Enniskillen to get in fresh supplies. Her cot it nearly foundered as waves would fall and rise. At times she'd sell her produce, including island eggs. She always took back oatmeal and 20 packs of figs. She didn't brew the poteen that kept her welcome shore. The mountain men that made it put it in for nest her door. Her kitchen walls were spotless, outside were loads of peat. The bellows at the hearthside kept all the place in heat. Poor Peggy will be welcomed in heaven, that's for sure, for ne'er a travelling person was ousted from her door. They all supped and drank together, and all enjoyed her pottage. The birds were always nesting above her lowly cottage. While Peggy may be dead now, her memory is bright. We'll not forget her message, fear God and do the right. Thank you for listening.